One of the biggest holes in their argument is the fact that they never heard of a plan to fly hijacked jets into landmarks on the East Coast.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attack.
And so then I saw Condoleezza Rice get up on TV and say, we had never thought, we had never heard. Why, that's a ridiculous conspiracy theory to say that.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened.
The Pentagon had a drill in November of 2000 simulating a hijacked jet being flown to the Pentagon. So between all the drills before 9/11 and the drill in the morning of 9/11, air traffic controllers thought that it was a simulation.
Hijacked aircraft headed towards New York.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, I'm a test.
And now respected rescue workers who worked the World Trade Center site say that they found 3 of the 4 data recorders and were ordered to load them on FBI vehicles and keep their mouths shut. Why would the feds want to cover up what was on those recorders? Thousands of years ago, when a crime was committed in Rome, the judges would ask one question, qui bono, or who stands to gain, who profits? And when we look at 9/11, the answer is clear. Let's look at what the Bush family was doing in the days before 9/11 and on 9/11, and it's quite revealing. Marvin Bush was in New York City running security for the World Trade Center complex. Former President Bush was in D.C. at the Ritz-Carlton for a Carlyle Group function, sitting at the head table with the head of the bin Laden family. 2 days before 9/11, Governor of Florida, Jeb Bush, declared unprecedented martial law in Florida. He didn't make the announcement until September 11th. Then we have the CIA-controlled head of Pakistani intelligence, General Ahmad Ahmed, arriving in Washington, D.C. on September 13th, just days after he wired, the New York Times admits, $100,000 to the supposed lead hijacker, Mohammed Atta. For the week he was here, preceding 9/11, he met with CIA Director George Tenet, the heads of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, Porter Goss and Senator Graham. By the way, Porter Goss has now been made head of the CIA. On the morning of 9/11, he was actually having breakfast with Senator Bob Graham and Porter Goss. What is the money man behind Mohammed Atta doing meeting with all the intelligence heads? In the days after 9/11, the public was told that we were going to be able to catch whoever was behind September 11th because they had engaged in record put options against American and United Airlines. But when the money trail led back to CIA-controlled companies headed up by people like Buzzy Krongard, number 3 at the CIA, the story was dropped like a hot potato. But that doesn't stop Buzzy from still going public and defending people like Osama bin Laden. He's told the Times of London and many other publications that we should just leave Osama bin Laden alone. Let him go free, that we've got a problem if we want to capture him. Prominent people across the world have been exposing the 9/11 cover-up. Michael Meacher, the number 3 man in the Blair government, wrote a huge editorial for the London Guardian titled "The War on Terror is Bogus," and he pointed out that NORAD stood down on 9/11. He wrote about the Project for a New American Century, run by Jeb Bush and Dick Cheney, years before 9/11, saying that they needed a helpful terrorist attack to get the American people behind their war for empire. Meacher concluded his article by saying, if the U.S. government didn't engineer the attacks, they certainly knew about it. Andres von Bülow was German defense minister and German technology minister. I interviewed him on my syndicated radio program, and he said there's no way Al-Qaeda carried out these attacks. Only the military-industrial complex could pull it off. But here's one of the biggest pieces of evidence. You all heard them say that a paper passport fell out of one of the towers and was picked up by a police officer on the street. This plane flies into the building, explodes with jet fuel out of the guy's jacket, goes through the fireball, through the side of the plane, out of the burning building, out of the fire shooting out, and comes down to the ground unscathed. But something happened. For 6 months, they reported they had this passport. Boy, we've got it. We've got the proof. And then the guy stood up and was alive in the Middle East. And they pulled it and said, oh, that was a mistake. He wasn't a hijacker. And the story just disappeared of the passport. Because believe me, this establishment can care less about you. The EPA found all the asbestos. The EPA, guys, said that there was asbestos and people were getting sick, and there was going to be $90 million for the police and firefighters for medical treatment. And Bush came in and had that blocked. Now that's mainstream news. And now of the 14 search and rescue dogs, 8 of them have died from cancer. In summation, it's important to note that we only covered a tiny portion